Everybody, today is what we refer to as GSD Network, which is our monthly founder con where we bring all of our GSD families together. And then we'll have a very special guest each month. And we do this the first Thursday of every month. So we hope that you join every first Thursday for many months to come. And today we have an awesome guest. He is an author, an investor, and he mentioned his partner, Gil Emilio, who is also no slouch himself, who famously was the former CEO of Apple that brought back Steve Jobs, but sometimes gets left out that he was also the CEO of a company called National Semiconductor, where he spent a lot more time and was incredibly successful. But regardless, we'll let Jerry introduce himself, and he will talk about his lessons that he's learned in leadership. And everybody here is either a leader or a future leader of a large organization. And then Gary and I will then ask Jerry some questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. And that portion will really go as long as it's interesting, but somewhere around 45 minutes to an hour. And then what we will do is we will go over to AirMeet, and it's a different platform which allows us to have virtual tables. And Gary, myself, Nick, and Jerry will each head a different table, and you could sit at it virtually. It's very easy if that sounds complicated. And that's just networking. And, I think of most of the folks that come to our accelerator are excited for us to connect you to amazing people. And certainly Jerry is on that list, but also I think sometimes that gets lost as there's amazing people in the accelerator itself. So we do want you to chat with Jerry, chat with Gary, but also chat with each other and talk world domination. So I'm going to flip it over to my partner. It's a little confusing when we have Gary and Jerry, but so I'm going to flip it over to Gary Fowler, who had an incredible couple weeks with everything going on with Eva, which is, we were all wishing him congrats, and that's amazing. But Gary, why don't you maybe just open it up for us and set the stage in terms of leadership and getting things done?
Yeah, no, it's great, and great to see familiar faces. So, absolutely, Derek. I mean, one of the things that's important, and I've spoken to most of you about it, are networks and connections. So you can imagine having the wealth of experience that somebody like Jerry has, his partner Gil Emilio, and having the experience dealing with corporations. So today, one of the things that we need to do, remember, the network is key to have success, to be able to have that billion-dollar company, to be able to do an IPO, to be able to do a SPAC, whatever you want to do, those networking connections. I'm not saying this lightly. They're critically important, especially today, now that we're in the Zoom digital transformation realm, right? Trust and credibility important. So what I want you to do here today is I want to make sure that, develop a relationship with the folks that you're going to see in this journey over the next few weeks with GSD. Develop those contacts and connections. They're going to be important for you, and we want to help. And also, we're learning from you too. There's pieces from each and every one of you where we can learn and we can do things together. So with that, Jerry?
Yeah, thank you. So Gil is an amazing character. He's by the way, he's a PhD physicist. He's not trained in business. He was a Bell Labs physicist. He invented the technology and got a Nobel mention. And he's got several patents, which without it, we would not have this. And of course, his work with Apple is stellar. He turned it around and turned it back to Steve Jobs. And to Steve Jobs' credit, Steve, as opposed to many leaders, many CEOs come in, they throw out everything that the predecessor did, and they start, do it their own way. Steve didn't do that. Steve carried on with everything Gil put in. And he's also a very modest guy, doesn't talk a lot about himself, but he's really an extraordinary human being. In fact, he just gave a talk with the Vatican a few months ago in Rome. Where he's always being asked to speak. So background story is Gil's also chairman of my company that I founded about 17, 18 years ago called Integral Performance. And he's chairman. I invited him in a while back. And Integral Performance is a company that I oversee, but I'm not active day to day unless there's a particular project that I can serve. And Integral Performance actually feeds into Beneventure Partners Accelerator Fund, which is our PE/VC. And right now we've got 4 portfolio companies. At least 3 of them will probably be early exits. Our whole game is to provide world-class Fortune 100 or FTSE 100 resources to startup companies, both pre and post revenue, to accelerate their performance, powerful and early exits. So I'm going to try to blend conversation both with Integral Performance and Beneventure Partners because they're kind of linked at the hip because Gil and I own both of them. So let me start off by saying that we're in a leadership crisis today, and it's increasing, not decreasing. And you look at any of the sectors, nonprofits, government, business, scandals, total lack of integrity and honesty. I separate integrity and honesty. And unless we do something about leadership, not only with startup and early stage companies, but in general, we're in for a rough future, not a very inspiring future. So what my and Gil's commitment is to expose a new model of leadership that has been termed Neuro Leadership, like brain, Neuro Leadership. Anyone, raise your hand if you heard that term. Neuro Leadership. Okay. I've been on the director for the Neuro Leadership Institute, which is a think tank research organization which studies and collects latest science on the brain, human brain, and they put it into a business context. So it's extremely powerful. We turned around a Honeywell division that was $2 billion and made it into $3 billion just in about a year and a half. There was a company with declining revenues and profits, bought, really hockey stick them. And the interesting thing is we didn't change anything. We didn't come up with, we didn't replace people or add people or come up with new products or tell them what to do. We just worked in the way they spoke and listened and collaborated. So a couple things about how we look at leadership, both as Beneventure with our own portfolio companies and Integral Performance with our clients, which tend to be the Honeywells, the PPs, the Credit Suisses of the world, the Shells, Continentals, all that. So just throw it out there. I don't know, are we using the chat function here? So,
Yeah, you could use the chat.
yeah, just a couple questions, just to see where things are at. What is a leader's main role? What would be their main role in your view as a leader, any leader? Okay, provide motivation, direction, and okay, great. Build strong teams, set vision. Good. Inspire and guide team to success. Pull in the right, okay, what does that say, pull in the right and what? I missed it.
Right talent.
Right talent, lead by example, create great team. Yeah, look, all accurate, and there is no right answer to this. But for access to having breakthroughs in leadership capabilities, venture portfolio companies and our clients, we look at one who is a master in bringing out the best performance in others. I'll repeat that. Great leader is a master in bringing out the best performance in others. Now, easy to say, not so easy to execute, right? How do we do that? Well, our view, and the view of the Neuro Leadership Institute and other people who study this stuff, scientists, we do it by improving other people's thinking, literally the way they process information. Particularly important today because we get a million to 2 million bits per second of information to our brain. Think about that, 1 million to 2 billion, 1 million to 2 million. No brain can accept all of that. So what the brain does is you tell it what you're looking for, and the brain will pick out what's relevant. What I call the bricks in the wall. You know, metaphorically, picture a wall of billions and billions of bricks. Each one of those bricks is knowledge or experience, right? When something new comes in, a new concept, new idea, the brain looks at it and says, okay, does this look like all the other bricks? Does it fit into the wall? If it does, what does it do? Discards it, right? Or it'll change it a little bit so it does fit in. So that's what I call the bricks in the wall motion. So the bedrock of all this, in our experience, is coaching. But not just coaching, but brain-based coaching. Raise your hand if you've had an executive coach. Sorry, I can't see everybody. Has anybody raised their hand? So executive coaching is a key component of this. And the other thing is the existing leadership model that we've all been brought up with, in essence, inherited, is about 135 years old, literally. It comes from the time when there was a master apprentice model. Well, we don't have masters and apprentices much anymore. We have people who are paid to think, but yet our leadership model has been designed out of satisfying a master apprentice model, telling people what to do, how to do it, having to do it repetitively. But today, as I said, people are now paid to think. They're highly educated. They have information literally at their fingertips. Thank you, Gil Amelio. For better or for worse. So there has to be a new model, and the new model that's evolving. And by the way, 18 years ago, when I told people I'm into neuro leadership, they would look at me like I had two heads. Like, neuro what? Now it's commonplace. In fact, on the book, if you've seen Forbes magazine, it was a separate book. It had to do with neuroscience and business. It was a whole book. It was like, $20 that I bought it. So the process of leadership has been constantly refined, particularly over the last 10 years. So let me stop there a second and maybe see if anybody has any insights or has any questions or any thoughts about what I just said about a new model of leadership. It's not just for early stage and startup companies. It is for the Fortune 100 and it is for the FTSE 100 because we do that day to day.
Hey, Jerry.
Yeah.
I'm going to make you co-host and I'm going to mute everybody. So just unmute yourself now.
Okay, I unmuted myself.
There you go. If someone has a question, they can mute, but that way it's a little easier to hear.
Gotcha. So want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, it was hard to hear.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I heard some background noise too. So the question is, based upon last few minutes of a conversation around neuro leadership, new leadership model suited for the 21st century, a model that's not 135 years old, a model that maximizes what we call human capital, that goes in the direction in which our brains go, that acknowledges the science, and other disciplines too, not just neuroscience, complex adaptive systems, systems theory, social psychology, ontology, by the way. If you're not familiar with the term ontology, sometimes people aren't. It's a branch of philosophy dealing with being. In our case, it's who are you being as a leader? Because leadership is a being, not a doing phenomenon. You don't do a leader, you be a leader, right? So we work in an ontological, who are you being as a leader? A lot of that is in how having people understand the filters through which people listen from. Because does anybody know what studies show generally is the percentage of things that we hear? What percentage of what's said do you think we hear? Just yell, shout it out.
20%, 10%,
Yeah.
30 to 40.
Yeah, 30 to 40 is right in the range. Most people say about 35%. Well, why? We have ears, nothing wrong with their ears, but why do we only hear 35, 40%? Anybody have any idea?
Other distractions while you're listening.
That's one.
We're subconsciously selecting information we're most familiar with and that we hear it the best,
That's called, yeah.
while new information takes longer to absorb most of the time.
That's called a familiarity bias. It's one of the 5 main biases: familiarity bias, location bias, like that. Yeah. So a lot of it is what I call the inner voice. Yeah, it's probably that inner voice that may have said, what does he mean by that? What inner voice? What's an inner voice? People are constantly talking to themselves. Nothing wrong, it's just the way the brain works. The brain constantly is saying, telling us to do and not do things. Be careful of that, be careful of the stove, it's hot, don't put your hand on it. Better not make a left turn because this guy's coming down pretty fast and looks like he's gonna turn in front of me. Because the brain's main job is what? Keep us safe. So it's all wired around keeping us safe. Well, you can't be an entrepreneur or an effective entrepreneur if that's your whole model is you follow the brain to keeping you safe. So we have this internal chatter that goes on, 24/7. We're constantly talking to themselves. And that gets in the way. You don't hear people. You ever notice people many times will answer a question you haven't even finished asking? They interrupt and they don't answer the question, they answer something else, particularly politicians. Do you ever notice that people many times will go away when you're talking to them and they're not present because they're listening to the inner voice? Now the question is, well, that's nice information, but what do I do with that? How does that impact organizational performance and leadership? Well, the good news is you can't do anything about it, and you don't need to do anything. All you need to do is distinguish that it does exist, and then when you hear your inner voice talking, you simply say, "Thank you for sharing," and put it aside and get back and be present to that other person. One of the operating practices we use, in fact, I just had a 4-hour leadership session with 45 people all over the globe for a company called ABB Inc., electrical engineering firm, huge, a Swiss company. And they're going through the need to elevate leadership and have a breakthrough in innovation. We do a lot in the area of innovation. And there's a link, you can't just have process for innovation, you have to have the leadership skills and models and tools to overlay that to make that effective. And all we need to do is acknowledge it exists, tell it to stop, and as an operating practice, when we do go away, when we're not present to another human being, like you said, when you hear a noise, we're distracted, right? Somebody walks by, we're distracted. This bloody thing beeps, we're distracted every time it beeps. And in fact, science tells us it can take us up to 3 to 5 minutes to get our brain back in the game to where we were. But how many times do you and I hear a beep? And I've shut my beep off, by the way. How many times do people text us when we hear a tone, or people call us incessantly? So here we're working on a project and it's, we've spent 5 minutes, boom, Oh, hello. Listen, I can't talk right now. Let me call you later. Boom. Guess what? Takes you 3 to 5 minutes to get back to where you were. And we wonder why things don't get done in organizations. Then, of course, bias, as we talked about, as we just mentioned, is a big piece of this. You know, people have biases that are, what was the term you used? Subconscious?
Correct.
Yeah.
So internal biases that you don't necessarily think about, but they're there. Not because you're a bad human, right? But you have certain predestined thoughts.
An example is, I'm gonna say a word, and this is what I call a background conversation, or what I call an already, always thinking about a category or a people or a person. I'm going to throw out a few words. Just tell me what you immediately what comes to mind. Just shout it out. Teenager. Teenager.
Unorganized, irresponsible, unorganized, law.
Trouble.
Drug, sex, rock and roll, crazy, can't count on them, stupid, you know, whatever you think. Now, very rarely, if ever, will someone say teenager. Wow, smart, responsible, intelligent, high integrity. Now, are all teenagers that way?
No.
No. And in fact, I've done some work with teens in the past, some volunteer work in this whole transformational area that we traffic in. And I've asked teens, many of them, how is it for you as a teen? How is it dealing with adults? And commonly they will say, horrible. That's why we don't talk to our parents or, you know, or any adults. Because I say, why? Because they don't think we have anything to offer. They treat us like we're irresponsible, you know, drug, sex, rock and roll, you know, all the things we just mentioned. But that's an already always thinking. I'll give you another one. Lawyer. Kind,
Anal.
generous, wonderful people, salt of the earth. Right, exactly. And on and on and on. Throw out the word engineer. Throw out the word entrepreneur. So we have our unconscious biases about anything and everything. And that gets in the way because you're hearing a teenager speak. As an adult, you're just going to tune them on. Now, again, biases are normal and they're natural. So if anybody comes to me and says, oh yeah, you know, retain our firm, we're a bias firm, we're going to teach you how not to be biased. Bull cocky, impossible. Biases come along with the territory of being human. The only thing you can do is distinguish, and science has distinguished 125 different biases, and Neuro Leadership Institute has broken it down into 5 different categories. Location bias, familiarity bias, confirmation bias. You know, the brain is always looking for something to prove we're right and they're wrong, and we'll bloody well go out and find it. This is the confirmation bias. That's why people who watch CNN, they watch it to confirm that they're on the left and they're right. Guys on the right are wrong. Vice versa. Conservatives listen to Fox or BPA network, or whatever it is. Why? To confirm what they're already thinking. And we wonder why people aren't open, why they don't hear, why we're in the breakdowns we are in the world, not only in business or startups, but it's in the world in general. And companies like Facebook obviously play on that. They're actually playing on that confirmation bias, which is starting to leak out now. People are starting to distinguish that. It's all about eyeballs and revenue. And you know if you're left or you're right or center, and they feed you the information so that you can confirm that you're right. So you will always keep coming back to Fox or CNN or BPA, you know, or Epic Times or whatever it is. So to put this in a business parlance, we work in the area of using neuroscience, cutting edge neuroscience to develop leadership programs and to have a transformation of leadership. We work with our portfolio companies so that we offer them that which they could not afford, because typically only Fortune 100, Fortune 250, Fortune 500 maybe can afford the time and resources to engage with us. But what if we could go to startup companies and pre-revenue, post office, pre-revenue, post-revenue, post office, post-revenue, early stage, gazelles, whatever, and provide them what we're providing. The BPs and the Credit Suisse and the Honeywells and all these Shell Oils and all these huge companies, they can afford millions of dollars for these programs. Startups can, and our future is what? Early stage companies. Those big companies, they kind of grow, and then they flatten out, and eventually, unless they intervene, what do? They go down. That's why, anybody know the statistics? I forget what they are now. How many Fortune 500 companies 10 years ago are no longer on the Fortune 500? Like half of them. What happened? And they reached that glass ceiling. They reached a point of complacency, or they didn't know what to do. They used the existing leadership model, which is 135 years old. It's bankrupt. It's spent. Particularly when you talk to millennials. Millennials, they've turned off. Study after study shows that millennials are not very different than us, older people or geezers, or whatever you want to call us. They're not much different. They just won't accept a command and control leadership style. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to be unleashed. And that's the other thing. People today don't need, whether it's a small company, medium-sized company, or large company, people today don't want to or need to be managed. They need to be unleashed.
Can I challenge that thought just a little bit?
Always open to challenge. I'm not always right. I'm usually right, but not always.
Yeah, because it's a broad statement saying that they don't want to be managed, they want to be unleashed. That being said, people want.
Can I call you back? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gil. In fact, we've been talking about you, so your ears must be ringing. Okay, that was Gil. I'm sorry, you challenged.
You're fine. You're fine.
Okay, get ready now.
Yeah, so by being unleashed, people don't want to be managed, you mentioned. So I think that comes off from a standpoint still, people want creative freedom to do what they think should be the right motion, but they still don't want responsibility over the motion, right? Somebody has to be responsible for the failure, right? If that motion is incorrect. I don't think that those people are still want to be responsible for the failure.
Well, they need to be told they are. You have to make people accountable in an organization. You can't.
So, yeah, right. Is that part of the leadership thought, right? Being able to put both precautions in place, have that freedom versus also, well, who's going to make that last call?
Well,
and
yeah,
fix the problem.
And that's a good question, because many times CEOs will ask, well, I'm willing to unleash people and I'm willing to give them freedom to come up with ideas and be creative and innovative. But what happens if they come up with an idea I know is not going to work? Well, what do you think? You tell them, no, I'm the CEO. I'm responsible for the top, for the bottom line. And the answer is that's not going to work. No, go figure out something else. So this is not about not making them accountable. It's actually to make them accountable, because accountability, look, when you have freedom, you have responsibility, right? Are we all U.S. Living in the U.S. here, citizens or residents? If we are, we have.
No,
What's that?
we're around the world.
Yeah, around the world. But in any country, you're going to be a citizen of that country. You need to be responsible and accountable. We're not letting people off the hook. In fact, au contraire, we're actually putting people on the hook. We're actually making them responsible. And part of that, to answer your question, is you get what you tolerate in business and in life. If you tolerate no, people not being responsible, what will you get? More people not being responsible or accountable. So the work we do is not just nicey nice, airy fairy, oh, let everybody do whatever they want, nobody's accountable. No, just the opposite. Our work is rigorous, it's demanding, it's focused, it's all about performance. That's why we named the consulting firm Integral Performance, not Integral Leadership. Because leadership is worked on in the service of organizational performance. In fact, having breakthroughs, not just incremental improvement. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question? I don't know.
Partially. And then the next point to your accountability portion of it, well, how do you find that fine balance between allowing people to get their fine-tuned creativity and not overly push them on timelines and just this deadline has to be hit no matter what type of pressure that
Great
very
question.
often gets created. So how do you find that balance between having, okay, this is a pressing matter and there needs to be a timeline versus people then, I don't want to say word lying, but essentially lying to you about the feasibility of the project because they want to seem like, yes, they're going to get it done in time when in reality there was never a real timeline.
And people do lie in organizations. People just lie. I mean, not only just in organizations, small, medium, they lie. And that's not uncommon. So the key here is that, and we're going through this, I'll give you an example. At a Fortune 50 company, I won't mention the name, we're involved in a leadership and innovation acceleration program, culture change, or what we call culture shaping, because you really can't change culture. You can shape it, but you can't change it. This is not a thing. It's a network, interrelated network of conversations that are going on in the organization at any one time that constitutes the culture, okay? And if you want to impact the culture, you impact the conversations that are causing the culture. You can't work on the culture. You can only work on the conversations from which the culture emerges. So, the neuroscience leadership model, sound like a neuro leadership salesman here, I don't intend to be, but why it's working so effectively with clients, and for me personally as a career CEO, I've been a CEO of 6 different companies, 4 of which I started. Michael has entered the room. You saw that?
Yeah, don't worry. I'll let them all in. You'll see them now just because you're co-host.
That's why I didn't know if I was supposed to do that or not. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What did I just say? I got distracted by that little blue dot.
You're been a CEO for 4 years in the Neuro Leadership model.
I've been a CEO for 6 different companies. I've been a founder of 4. I've been in 3 venture capital firms. Beneventure Partners is the current one. I did turnarounds both for my own companies, for big clients like Honeywell and BP, all this stuff. And so what I find is that the new leadership model is you make requests, and people can accept, decline, or counter offer your request. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't hold them accountable. That doesn't mean that people can just decline every request you make and not doing anything. No. But when you ask somebody, when can you get this done? Sometimes, even many times, they'll actually exceed what you thought they would say. Have you had that experience? If you tell them what to do, then it shows up as a threat response. They get worried, they're like, I'm going to fail, and if I don't do this, I'm going to get fired, whatever. And that's when you get people in a position where they can lie and will.
Well, business people, yes, I would agree. The scientists, I think they have no concept of what timeline is. They never have a proper understanding how long things take. That's why I'm asking, how do you find that balance? But I do like the request counter offer discussion wise, instead of just saying, hey, this is a flat line. It has to be done this way or you're out.
Here's what's missing in this conversation. I make a request for you. You could accept, decline, or counter offer. If you counter offer, you decline, by the way, I may say, okay, I'll find somebody else to do it. Or I may say, you're fired. If you counter offer, if you come up with a date that I can't live with as a CEO, I said, I'm sorry, that's not going to cut wood. That's not going to work. Sorry. You got to figure out a way. Now I'll coach you. I'll work with you to the extent practicable that, you know, you can make this work, but I need this done by this date. But if it shows up as a command and control, like you will get this done. And you have to give people skills. On this 4-hour meeting we just had with 45 people all over the world with the Swiss company. One of the things we talked about is in the area of innovation is company has gone to its people and said, I'll say this a little bit tongue in cheek, but effectively, this is what they said. Effective Monday morning at 9 o'clock, you will all be innovative, and we will have an innovative culture and innovation company, breakthrough innovation company. Now, what kind of response are you going to get to that? I mean, almost literally, as they said that. You have to give people skills, models, and tools so they can do that. The other thing is, if you're too rigorous in terms of demands, watch out for the pitfall that we've all probably heard the expression under promise and over deliver. I don't buy that, because when people under promise, they'll deliver what they've under promised. They rarely, if ever, produce what they could really produce. It's just a CYA thing. I remember Lord John Brown, when I led the BT Business Transformation Project, culture change, leadership, culture, the whole bit. John asked, in the context of this project, he said, hey, how come when I give people stretch goals, they don't meet them? So what I do is I move the goalpost and I give them a bigger stretch goal. And not only don't they meet that, their performance actually goes down. I said, gee, John, I don't know. I have the same experience, but I'll find out. You're paying us enough. I'll go find out. And I did. And the answer is very straightforward. And can anybody figure out what it was, what it is, what the answer is? Because they don't see it as possible. See, people's actions are perfectly correlated with what they see as possible. We do a thing in work sessions or workshops, or whatever you want to call it, where we'll take a tennis ball. We'll get somebody up in the room. There may be 30, 40, 50 people in a room. And we throw them the tennis ball. And we throw a little bit further each time. And they catch it, or sometimes they miss it. Sometimes they'll lunge and catch it, but they'll always try, right? Once you throw that tennis ball completely out of their reach, what do you think they do? Nothing. They stand there like a stick in the mud. They don't even try. And you ask them, well, what happened? You've been leaping for the ball, jumping, diving. Sometimes you catch it, sometimes you don't, but you've been really giving it their old college try. What happened? And their answer is always, because I didn't see it as possible. So really, a leader's job is to have people see possibility. When someone sees a possibility, their actions will be perfectly correlated with getting that possibility for themselves and their enterprise. If they don't see it as possible, if they consider it pie in the sky, if I tell you, I want you to invent a rocket ship to Venus by Thursday, close of business, I mean, are you even going to try? Of course not. So go ahead. I'm not sure if I'm completely answering your questions, but go ahead if you'd like to ask some more. We have another.
I think there's did you see the one about, is there an opportunity where you could use AI to nudge leaders into neuro leadership style? For example, warn that you as a leader are showing behavior not expected. I think a lot of us are technologists, so we always think, how can AI help solve this problem in analytics? So I'd be curious around your thoughts around that.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Do I know how to do it? No, I'm not an expert in AI. I have a firm, guy in the firm, our CTO is somewhat expert in AI. He's been involved in this area for many, for over a decade. He knows a lot more. He could probably give you some specifics on a product that would work. If I had a product that would work, I would have invented the company by now. They don't. But the answer to the question, short answer to the question is absolutely AI can help. See, when you get,
Um,
go ahead.
no, I was just going to see. I mean, what do you think should be the KPIs of a leader? Like, what are the metrics on what makes, like, how do you judge a leader, especially if you're a leader of leaders? Like, is it happy employees, revenue performance? How does the model that you're discussing lead to actually, tracking them in a quantitative way?
Yeah. Well, again, the overarching thing is organizational performance. That's the biggest metric. Obviously, that's what when I'm on boards. I'm on about 10 different boards, 9, I guess. So I'm always looking at performance as the first metric. Then you drill down further about that. But there are many things: retention, retaining the best people, acquiring the best people, EBITDA, top line, bottom line. I got to turn the cell phone off. At BP, one of the 4 work streams we did, culture change, leadership, reconfiguring how the finances were viewed to the board and presented to the board and all that. There was also a performance management framework project, which I got deep on. In fact, I worked with McKinsey on it because they had some specialists in this area. I had about 3 or 4 people from McKinsey, really smart. And we developed what's called a balanced scorecard. You probably heard that term, right? And it balanced things out from long-term to short-term and so forth. Secondly, when you do these projects, invariably, at least every project we've done over the last 18 years, and I predict we'll have success in the future based on that, every project impacts every single element of the KPI. It's a company called Ensign Energy, a global energy company out of Calgary. They're all over the world. Small company, about, not small, but relatively small, about $3 billion in revenue. We did a global business transformation for them. And there were things that happened that we didn't anticipate. So the CEO came to me and said, hey, for the first time in history, every single person met every single KPI, including safety. A huge leap in safety. They said, I didn't know you guys worked in that area or had expertise in safety, worker safety. I said, we don't. One thing I know is don't walk under a ladder, and that's a superstition. You laughed. He said, well, how did that happen? It's an outflow of the transformational work we did, where people were able to communicate, got people beyond the fear response to a degree. It impacted everything.
Let's see. Different leadership skills for different. So what are your thoughts on that? Did the different leadership skills for different phases of a business, a wartime CEO sounds so dramatic when we say that versus a peacetime CEO, turnaround versus growth, et cetera. Like, do you buy that there's different skills that are needed, or would you say that regardless of where the organization is, you can be adaptive and use some of these traits?
Yeah, I don't think it's either or. I don't think it's 100% one way or the other. I think it's a blend. I mean, there may be situations where you need certain characteristics or personality traits or experience or industry, experience. Like if you turn around an oil company and you've run Microsoft, I mean, that may not be a good fit. But generally speaking, I will tell you this. We hold these leadership, culture shaping, breakthrough performance projects, turnarounds. We lead them all over the world, 5 or 6 continents. We don't change the content. When I went over to Azerbaijan, Baku, where BP had this huge facility, and we did leadership training because the Azerbaijan government told BP, if you don't have the Azerbaijanis running this company in leadership positions, we're gonna nationalize your company. So BP called and said, help, we're gonna lose our company. It was a huge, piece of their revenue. We went over there and we found actually that, interestingly, well, let me put that on hold a second. What we did in our curriculum and our work with the Azerbaijanis were the same as any other nationality. And in fact, in VP, we used to hold these courses, 30 people at a time. They were 4 weeks over a period of 7 months. Huge investment. Evidently, there was a big enough return on investment that they did this for years. And we never changed. We never said, okay, how many people are from Singapore? Okay, we got to do this. Or how many people are from, Russia? We need to do this. Or how many people in California? Or how many people in New York? No, we just treat people as people. Because guess what? We're all the same. From a genetic standpoint, what's the statistic? I think we're 96, 97% the same genes, no matter our race, creed, or color. We're all people. Our brains are all the same. I mean, some people are inherently smarter than others, and they know this or know that. But basically, the human brain reacts, and responds to outside stimulus the same way. So the answer is yes and no. There are times when you need a specific skill set with general skill sets of a leader inside the notion that a leader's, and again, this is what I say, you don't have to buy into it or accept it or agree with it, but my experience has been both as a CEO, career CEO, and as a leader of a global consultancy, is that a leader's job is to get the best performance from others. And there's many ways to do that. But the same basic skills need to be there. You're going to be a great CEO, you need to learn about listening. So, we take CEOs and those senior people, and we spend a day on how people listen. And they come out of there, and all of a sudden they hear things they've never heard before.
One of the things that I talk a lot about, and where I think people get tripped up, is they fill their calendars because they think that as a leader, they need to be leading by example. So they see how much blue they could get on their calendar. And I used to be, when I was leading other leaders, I used to preach that if 40% of your job is leadership, or 50% of your responsibilities are leadership, whatever that percentage is, that's the percentage of your calendar that needs to be devoted to that. And if you have 8 calls a day, you're not leading, because, and that's where I think guys get tripped up, is because now a leadership responsibility comes in and they're multitasking, they're not listening, and that's where they fail. So I was just wondering, how do you think about, as a CEO, prioritization? And because you do have to leave time for that coaching and the listening, but you also have to, execute your responsibilities to make sure that objectives are met, et cetera. So I'd just be curious, what tips or how you view the prioritization of that.
Yeah, I've actually done a series of courses with 2 different productivity companies. One of them works inside and outside of Microsoft, and I was on the board of advisors for about 3 years, and I've actually taken the courses. So I know a little bit about that area. So first of all, anybody tells you how busy they are, be suspect, because they're too busy to get anything done. Secondly, if you're that busy, something's off. You're not delegating enough. You're spending time on the 80% of the stuff that's going to generate 20% of the revenue instead of the 20% that's going to generate 80% of the revenue. And a lot of it is based in fear and ego. See how busy I am, particularly in the United States, more so in the United States than it is in Europe, for example, or Asia. There, they honor free time and think time. But the problem is, if you accept the notion that leadership is a being phenomenon, it's an ontological phenomenon, not a doing phenomenon, you need time to think. And if you agree with the notion that people today are being paid to think, so is the CEO. Being paid to think, not to do. A lot of time it's just baloney that they're that busy. And people call me frequently and say, Jim, sorry, I'm sure you're busy. I'm not busy. And I really mean that. I'm not that busy, but I get the job done. I get the job done because I'm not busy, because I'm making time to think. One of the operating practices that I've taken on internally at Beneventure and Integral Performance, and we make it an operating practice with clients, and they report back great results. It's the first thing I do is when I get up in the morning, get my cup of coffee, I clear off my desk and shut off my, all my distractions, cell phone, whatever, beeps on the computer. And I think, and I plan my day. Now, why do you plan your day? Because if you don't, the day will plan you. You'll be interrupt driven. You'll be reactive. You'll be beholden to what other people's agenda is. So you plan your day and you put it in your calendar and you make time to think. Another operating practice is emails. Emails drive people nuts. Great people are retiring early. It's a brain drain. Why? Because emails literally driving them crazy. They drive me crazy. So what I do is I have 3 slots in my day and I let everybody know. I check my emails, not first thing in the morning. First thing in the morning, I plan the day. I check my emails at 10 o'clock. I check my emails at 1 o'clock. And I check my emails at 5 o'clock. So don't expect me to immediately pick up the phone or immediately respond to a text or an email, because we're becoming spoiled. We're spoiled brats about technology, particularly the younger generation. Literally, I have gotten calls from people. Hey, I sent you a text. You didn't answer. Really? Well, let me look. I'll go, you sent it 3 minutes ago. Are you kidding me? You think I'm just sitting here waiting for your text? You got to manage that. You have to have a process that works for you. But again, my recommendations: set time to reflect, think, plan a day. Do you know what takes up the most brain power? And as you probably experienced, the ability to think and make good decisions declines with every decision you make. It doesn't matter how big the decision is or not. It could be what to have for breakfast, or it could be how to, solve the war in Ukraine. Every decision degrades your ability to think. So the lesson learned is don't make big decisions, because studies show that decisions that blew up, big decisions that blew up, were usually made late in the day. So literally sleep on it before you make a decision.
Yeah, one of the things Jerry, we had a 4-star admiral on the show, was the head of the 6th Fleet, #2 guy in the U.S. military. And I asked him a question. I said, what's the main, as a leader, as you've progressed through the military, was the main thing that really helped you as a leader? And he said, compassion. And he said, when the Gulf Storm, Desert Storm took place, he was on the flight deck, and he said, he sat there with the men and women, and he said he actually had tears in his eyes because he knew 10% of them wouldn't be coming back. So one of the things we have here, we have an international group. We're from all over the world. We're from the Ukraine. We're from the Netherlands. We're from Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, India. We're from all over the US. But one thing is value differences. Each one of us react in a different way. Each one of us have different cultures and different norms. The one thing that I've found living in Europe, living in Russia, spending time in the Ukraine and Belarus, is that think differently, accept the background of that person, incorporate it in, and have compassion for that person in their within their own culture. So the other thing is, as you go down through as a leader, Jerry, dive into it with the team. It's not just about you as a leader on the top. It's about diving in. There are different times you got to do things. And I've seen it with every one of the startups that I've been involved in. You dive in. And sometimes there's things, doing customer discovery with a billionaire, David Yang, and walking down the street in Palo Alto and interviewing 50 people, each of us. And we each had a contact. Whoever got the most would buy the other one dinner. Stupid thing, but it worked. Have a little bit of fun too.
Yeah. Well, look, there are certain powerful things in leadership that I don't care what industry you're in or what country you're in or what part of the world you're in, they're important. One is authenticity. Be authentic. Number two is be compassionate. Get into their world. I'm not particularly fond of the term servant leadership, but you could say servant leadership. I say it as a CEO, I've always had, even before I got into expanding my leadership capabilities. My first company I founded was when I was about 28 years old, and I realized I didn't have skills and tools to grow the company. I was fine when it was small, but I see, as I grew it, it would outgrow me. I'd have to hire somebody else to run it. So I began this journey of educating myself in the area of leadership and shaping culture and all that. It's important to have those basic attributes. And also, I'll give you another example. Can we all align on the fact that a feedback culture is valuable in an organization? People accepting feedback from their boss and the CEO, right? Does anybody have a debate about that? I'm hearing no. Okay. So what is the best way to create a feedback culture? To get people to accept feedback without it being a threat. Because once it's a threat, they can't hear anything. They just shut down. They're literally afraid of their life. What's the best way to create a feedback culture as a senior leader?
One question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Great discussion about multitasking, not listening, business of mind, and what you were saying about that we are masters of creating biases and the inner chatter. Don't you think it's possible to substantially decrease the habits of creating biases and inner chatter via methodologies that relax your mind very profoundly, and which will be actually changing your character quite a bit, so that actually leadership journey is not only anymore the external leadership methodologies what you can learn by books, but it becomes also a journey of creativity, open-mindedness, which brings also the qualities of compassion, authenticity, and also good. This brings what you were saying about good listening skills, because if you are having this big journey, which is as important as the normal leadership qualities, then you necessarily become a good leader, in my view. What are your thoughts on that, please?
Boy, I believe in three-way communication, and that is you speaking, me listening, and me repeating back what I thought I heard, which allows you to say, yeah, you got it, or no, you missed it. So I'm going to try to recreate and feed back to you what I should say. By the way, before I do that, let me answer the question. What we find empirically works in the area of creating a culture where people are open to feedback and don't take it as a threat is for you as a leader to ask them for feedback. Because when you ask an employee, you're the CEO, and you ask an employee, hey, give me some feedback on this, all of a sudden they have like, well, it's a CEO or my boss is asking me for feedback. And when I give it to them, they're open. Gee, maybe I should accept feedback and not take it as a threat. But what I'm hearing from you is that there are a multiple of things that are inherent in what I call a transformation of leadership. Because we're into the game of transformation. That's distinct from change. Change is changing what you're doing something different to get a better result. Transformation is altering who you're being to get a breakthrough result. So we work in the area of transformation and breakthrough results, not the other. So tell me a little bit more about, and see if you can phrase it as because I heard statements.
Well, I think, Jerry, I think what he's saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Pekka, but I think what he's advocating for, which I do agree with, is meditation
Well, I was gonna
and
say,
mindfulness exercises as a leader.
absolutely.
And is that a good, I mean, basically he's a big advocate. I just know Pekka, he likes to meditate and he's a very mindful leader himself. And I
Well,
think he's,
meditation is always a good thing. It's always powerful. It's always worth the time. I've tried meditation. I don't know, for some reason, I don't get a lot of traction. I'm not sure why, but I do get value out of it. People swear by it. It's a fact that people meditate. And by the way, the internal voice, there are people who are expert in meditation. I mean, they're really masters in that. They reach a point where they've almost eliminated their inner voice. I've never seen one 100% be able to do that, but they get pretty close. Those people who don't meditate, they have a stronger inner voice. So yes, all of that is powerful. And leadership isn't just do one thing or 5 things. Leadership is 1,000 things you can do to be a better leader. But you have to understand, we say, neuroscience. You have to understand the brain and how it works. You have to have tools and models and skills. You have to distinguish how people listen, so you can listen more powerfully to other people, and you can train them to listen more powerfully to you. For example, with ABB in Switzerland, we're working a lot in the area of voice of customer. You've probably heard that phrase. And the problem is, how can you listen to a voice of a customer when you don't know how you or they listen? When you can distinguish how they listen and what's in the way of people hearing the other 65% of what you're saying, then you can achieve a breakthrough. And that's a good example of how our work is agnostic. It doesn't matter if you're the Netherlands or China or France or whatever. I mean, we have people from all over Europe and the States and Canada, and one guy from Mexico, and a couple from I think we have one Middle Eastern person and a couple from China. There's a certain core of leadership skills because everyone is dealing with the brain. There's a distinction, by the way, brain-based coaching. David Rock, who's the founder of Neuro Leadership Institute, he wrote a great book called Brain-Based Coaching. It's like a textbook, like 550 pages. I've read it 3 times over the years. I'm probably going to read it a 4th, but it is kind of like the best book on neuroscience-based coaching I've ever read. I mean, it is really amazing. If you want to know how to coach, that's a good place to start.
so does anyone,
Did I
go
answer,
ahead.
I'm sorry, did I answer your question? I know it was not sure if we answered it. Or I'm not even sure. Did the question get answered?
Pekka, did we answer your question?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Thanks.
Okay, good. Well, I passed the test. Good, thank you.
All right, so let's do one last question, and then we're going to go to AirMe. But what's your advice on good decision making? Leaders need to make decisions often on limited data. How do we reconcile failures and learnings?
Well, first you need to distinguish the difference between a decision and a choice. Because there are times you make decisions, there are times you make choices. People are more powerful when they make choices. And the difference is decision, the Latin comes from same thing as homicide, genocide, fratricide. Decision is you kill off one thing to have another. So you put the pros and the cons. Nothing wrong with that. It's necessary, useful. But at some point, you get to a point where it's like, okay, I get the pros and the cons, now what? And sometimes you just got to choose. And we do an exercise in choice versus decision. I'll just really quick, maybe Gary, maybe you want to take this on. I'm going to play with you just for 1 minute. It'll take 1 minute. So I want you to choose vanilla ice cream cone or chocolate. I'll choose vanilla. This is not a decision now. Vanilla or chocolate ice cream?
Chocolate.
Good. Why?
Well, because I like them equally, actually. So like I figured this time I'll try chocolate because actually yesterday I had vanilla.
Okay. That's the first one I've heard that response. Okay, you got me. I'm stymied. No. Yeah, choose one. Choose vanilla or chocolate.
Chocolate,
Okay, why?
because I like it. Tastes good, flavorful.
You should choose
it's
it.
Good.
Yeah, yeah. Now, most people, when you do this exercise, it was very good, Gary. It's the first time I've had somebody respond. The right answer, or the quote right answer, is because I choose it. Why do I choose chocolate? Because I choose it. Why did I decide to do this project? To innovate this in this way? Because I choose it. That doesn't mean you don't go through the pros and cons and decision piece, but eventually, sometimes you just need to make a choice. I choose this because I choose this, not because I think vanilla is more creamy and chocolate has a bitter aftertaste. That's all reasons. That's all in the decision mode. And it's very freeing when people get in executive positions, leadership positions, that eventually they just probably just need to make a choice and give up all the decisions. Kill off chocolate, tell all the bad things about chocolate so you can have vanilla. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So what I want to do is, first of all, thank Jerry. I always mention how precious time is and acknowledge that. And we really do thank you so much for coming. The next phase of GSD Network is, sorry, I didn't mean to show you my email. I meant to show you this. And there we go.
An email that I wanted to read. It looks really interesting. No, I'm kidding.
So this is what you're going to see when you get the link. I will post it in a moment, and then you just click on this button, answer a couple questions, and then when you arrive.
Sorry, I missed that. Which button do you click on? We went too far for me.
I
mean, if it's easy, you don't have to do it, but I just.
You just look for the purple button. See where it says register for the event? Click the button.
Register event. Okay.
So click that. You'll answer us a couple quick questions. And then what you will see when you arrive, some of you have done this before, is you'll see some tables that look like this, and you could just click this button that says join. So like Nick will be at the head of one, Jerry will be at one, Gary, myself, you could join the one. There's also other tables if you guys want to do your own breakouts. So that's what you're going to do. So literally I'm going to paste the link in here. And so you guys can grab it and then just come right away. It'll be a little messy, but just bear with it.
Hey, Derek, I have an idea here if you'd like to. I can send you a PDF copy of Performance Edge. And
yeah, do that, and I'll send it. I'll send you everyone the book. Yeah, that's great.
Everybody in the world the book if you want for free. I didn't write it to make money. You don't make money writing books usually. So I'll be happy to send it to you. Feel free to broadly distribute it. I think it'll touch base on some of the things we talked to provide more clarity.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
So everyone click that link and join AirMeet. And Jerry, I also sent it to you in your email.
Got it.
And we'll get cracking.
Wonderful.
See everyone in a minute. Thank you so much, Jerry.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks,
All right,
gang.
cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.